Hello, everyone, and welcome to our little corner of today's internet. How are you doing, Scott?
I am fantastic. How are you, Amy?
I'm great. For those of you who don't know me or haven't joined a webinar in the past, I'm Amy, and I am our resident webinar host. And today I am truly thrilled to be here because we have a really fun session featuring none other than FullStory CEO and co-founder Scott Voigt. And today we get to talk about building digital experiences through the eyes of our customers. But before I pass things over to Scott, a couple of housekeeping items. For starters, we are recording, and so if life gets in the way of you staying through to the end of the session, don't worry. We will send a link to the recording to everyone who registered, whether you can attend or not, whether you can make it all the way to the end or not. And second, we are having a lot of time for questions today. So in your GoToWebinar side panel over here, you should see a box where you can type in a question. Scott and I are going to spend a lot of time just kind of discussing digital experience and empathy and building for your customers. And we would love to hear your questions, and Scott would love to answer them. So don't hesitate to drop your questions in, even if they're not related to digital experience. You want to talk about podcasts? You want to talk about cereal? These are all things we like to talk about. And that's it. So without further ado, Scott, welcome.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It dawned on me as you were doing that wonderful intro, by the way, you're very good at this, that I am old and I haven't done a webinar in a little while. And the last time I did a webinar, there was no video. It was just like you were dialing into a phone. It was like a seminar via phone. But oh, how the world has evolved. Welcome, everybody. I'm thankful that you are here for the next, let's call it 30 minutes and change. We will meander through some stories and hopefully leave you with an idea or two. Maybe, just maybe, this will be the best webinar you've ever attended, which is something that Amy and I have been angling for a while now. If it is, we may package this up and send it to Netflix, and perhaps they might pick it up as a series. So that's one of the ideas. We're hoping here. Okay, we had a pretty interesting title and lead into this that was good enough to hook you into registering. It was about a woman named Mrs. Bennett. Now, many of you are probably like, what in the world is the backstory on Miss Bennett? But in reality, there is a backstory. FullStory tells stories, and so if I can make my slides go here, there you go. There's Miss Bennett. That's actually not Miss Bennett. That's Betty. Betty what? What's her last name? Amy?
White.
Yeah, there you go. Betty White. My family, the four of us, recently had to move out of our house because a kitchen project went sideways, and we moved in truth, with a wonderful woman who was Miss Bennett. And so her family had recently moved on. She was empty nesting, and she was taking us in, which was lovely. And as it turns out, she was not the most technically sophisticated person in the world. And so, you know, I went to Georgia Tech. I helped co-found a technology company. Clearly, I know everything there is to know about technology. And so a true story that is really rather horrifying, but a true story that kind of pulls everyone towards thinking about Miss Bennett in design, which is going to be the theme here, is that Miss Bennett was, she got a brand new car. She had had the car for 2 weeks, and she was so excited about this new car. And one day, stuck in traffic, a stolen car, white car on left, was careening down the road at 90+ miles an hour and clipped Miss Bennett's car. That's Miss Bennett right there in the middle in the gray car, destroying her car, completely rattling Miss Bennett. and unfortunately injuring some people down the road even further. Fortunately for Ms. Bennett, the person behind her had a dash cam on, and they pulled over and they sent her a link to this dash cam footage. So Ms. Bennett wanted to work with her insurance company to file the claim. And she was having a devil of a time one night. And, you know, think about poor Ms. Bennett and the drama and trauma that she's gone through. Her brand new car is totaled. She is, you know, a few inches away from her life in this accident. And now she has to go slog through an insurance form to try to get reimbursed for her car. And everybody knows that insurance process isn't always as wonderful as you want it to be. So she started working on it, and she just couldn't make it tick. And so she came to me and said, hey, Scott, could you help me here? I'm having a hard time. And again, because I know everything there is to know about technology, I said, I got this, Ms. Bennett. Oh my gosh. I started this process with a full head of hair, and by the end of it, this bald spot that you can now see because we have video on webinars was rubbed in the top of my head as I tried to upload this dash cam link into the insurance site, and just failed time after time after time when there was no feedback and it should have worked, and I changed the file type and I changed the file size. It was just an awful experience. And then even when I went to the live chat to try to engage and get a lifeline and some help, I couldn't get any help that way. As you see me trying to engage, hello, 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 hello. And so it is way too often that lovely people like Ms. Bennett and rather nice people like me are struggling mightily with these digital experiences. And so the way that we both felt was truly rage at that insurance company as we went through an arduous time. And that's no good. Nobody wants that. I think what happens in the reason that companies experience this is because we've been so ingrained to think about the charts and graphs of whether something is good or whether something is bad, that we lose sight of the individuals that are behind what's going on. Take, for example, this chart, right? It's moving up to the right. And if we layer on the concept of errors, you know, it's going up a little bit, but it's not going up as much as the traffic is. So is this good? It's kind of hard to know. So sometimes you just have to think back to all the people that are represented by that one particular error bar. And even then, it's faceless masses. We know we're frustrating some people out there. But if you can put somebody, one persona, maybe it's your mother, maybe it's your grandmother, you know, and think of Ms. Bennett when you're designing that experience, it can really bring empathy into the equation. And I think it will drive everybody in the organization to do a little bit better work. So at FullStory, when we set out to start FullStory a while ago, one of the things we always came back to was this idea that everybody deserves a perfect digital experience. I mean, wouldn't that be a wonderful world if every time we logged into something, it just worked exactly as planned? There are reasons beyond just wanting that to be true. I mean, one of the things that sometimes we do reflect on is when you're raging at a product, you're creating stress. Stress makes your cortisol levels go up. Cortisol levels, when they're high, start to lead to heart disease. Heart disease, no good. That shortens people's lives. So, you know, I know it sounds a little bit cheesy to say, but better digital experience is in fact making for a better life or a longer life for people. You know, it can also go to the intersection of frustration and financial, right? Insurance company sued by man, claiming heart attack triggered by an unusable website. Amy she looks skeptical. Rightfully so, Amy, that is totally fake. I made that up, but it doesn't seem as far-fetched as that, really. It's just a matter of time. It's like the hot coffee at McDonald's that somebody is just raging on a website. And we joke now, but one day. Okay, so there is this ideal practical mission of everybody deserves a perfect digital experience. And I assume that everybody that's dialed in today more or less has a stake in digital experience. Like, you care about that. That's what pulled you in. Of course, there is a very practical purpose to the idea of a better digital experience, and it's costing your business money every time it's suboptimal. And so I'm gonna move outside of Ms. Bennett here, and I'm gonna tell a little story about myself, Scott Voigt. So we changed offices not too long ago, and there is a Chipotle affixed to our office. It's basically the FullStory company cafeteria, at least when we used to come into the office. And every day around 11:30, you would see people start to get their phones out in the office to get out the Chipotle app and order a burrito for lunch. But what was crazy, for me at least, is when I went in to order my delicious carne asada burrito. They discontinued the carne asada, but the chicken burrito. When I go in to do that, way more than one time, I have experienced failures such that in the 5-minute window I had to order and go grab my burrito, I was unable to. And that made me sad, and it lost Chipotle some money. And they are sorry, I know, but I think they'd rather have my $8 than be sorry. But when you start to look at the math of the impact of this, it's pretty astounding. So this was pulled from their annual report, where they said 13% of all of Chipotle's revenue is digital. And that was staggering to me. Even more, it is 66% annual growth on the digital channel. Believe it or not, I looked right before this webinar started, and both of those numbers have increased. The growth rate now is 88%, and the total amount of sales is 18%. So as I go through the math here in a second, know that the numbers are even higher than what I'm about to show you. So 13% of sales. Let's do some math. Annual revenue for Chipotle is 5.2 billion, give or take. That is a lot of burritos. At 13%, you're looking at about $675 million of digital burritos. It's a lot. But
imagine what it has been in the past 2 weeks.
For real, Amy, I used the Chick-fil-A app just last night to go just do a pull up and get some nuggets for the kids. So it's growing very fast, and for most of these companies, the only channel at this point. Math it out some more, and assuming that I did the maths right, you're looking at about $6.7 billion worth of digital burritos over the next 4 years. That's crazy. But something's not right all too often. So imagine what it could be if it was a perfect digital experience. Go with me on that journey. So I don't know how often it fails. I don't think Chipotle knows how often it fails, because I don't think you can easily collect the data on that in the past. But if you say it's tens of millions of dollars of just people not being able to convert, hundreds of millions of dollars, I think it's a realistic expert that it's somewhere between those fence posts. But that's just the direct failed conversions. Think further. There's return visits. So that first person that installs the app and has a bad experience, they're never going to come back. And there's a compounding cost to that first customer that gives up. There's negative word of mouth, and marketers will attest that this is something that is really, really bad. And just to prove that I'm not making it up, I found this tweet. Chipotle app is the worst. Like, damn, make me not even want the S asterisk 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 no more. I don't know what are under those asterisks, but I don't think it's good. So negative word of mouth. So failed conversions, return visits, negative word of mouth. That's just on kind of the revenue side of things. Let's look at the cost side of the equation. Food waste. How often do you think it happens that somebody says, I ordered this, oh, it's at the wrong store? They're not gonna make you pay for that again. I don't think they're gonna make you pay for that again. So they're gonna go throw the burrito away, or somehow the order wasn't quite right and they're gonna throw that away. Food waste has environmental impacts beyond just the food cost that it costs Chipotle. There's store labor costs associated with having confusing apps, customers that are unhappy berating employees. Like, there's some real costs tied up in that. And then there's the engineering labor associated with not understanding those digital experiences. And you've got a bunch of engineers probably chasing ghosts, trying to figure out what actually happened. Where if you could take those engineering hours and actually make those hours go back to optimizing conversions. You know, somebody told me once, I don't know if it's true, that the most profitable phrase in business is, would you like fries with that? Now, in Chipotle's case, that's, would you like guac and chips with that? But if you could take your engineering time from chasing bugs and move it over to optimizing conversions, you're really looking at tens of millions more dollars by just focusing on that. You add all of these bubbles up and you get one huge digital burrito of value that I would estimate is $100 million for one burrito company. But we know that the world isn't just one burrito company, right? There are chicken sandwich companies, there are pizza companies. You know, in these very interesting times that we're in right now, everybody is a takeout company at this point. And every time those experiences fail, that's a big deal. But it's outside of food, it's travel. You know, this was a rage click of me trying to book a flight on my phone, and the little red button at the corner just didn't work for whatever reason. And so I had to call, and that's expensive for this particular airline. But it's not just the airline, it's hotels, it's car rental companies. Digital experience matters everywhere. I would say that it is hundreds of billions of digital experience loss that is happening every year. And most people that care about the product experience want it to be perfect. They don't even know where they're losing these things. So my takeaway is that digital experience matters more than we probably even believe. Like, we know it matters, but when you really start to map it out, it is a bigger problem than we think. So why aren't we doing better is a good question. And I think the answer is we can start to, and we're just on the new frontier of focusing on digital experience. It starts with the fact that you can't fix what you don't know is broken. And whether it's design and user experience or engineering or product management, the tooling that has been available in the past has not captured the breadth and depth of data, nor has it been able to process the breadth and depth of that data in order to really surface up these bad experiences to people. A while ago, a long time ago actually, the CTO of the company Eloqua, a guy named Steve Woods, wrote a book called Digital Body Language. And at the time, it was really about path analysis and understanding whether customers had intent to buy or not. And this was on the forefront of marketing automation. But the concept of digital body language is something that I just think it really resonates. And if you believe that when I'm frustrated on a burrito app, or Ms. Bennett is struggling with an insurance app, that we are sending our signals of frustration into the digital ecosystem, we should be able to see that and understand those patterns and surface them up to the people that can go and fix the problems. FullStory copyrighted a term called rage clicks a while ago. And the idea of a rage click is exactly what you think it is. It is the idea that you're hammering on a mouse in frustration, and we all do this all the time. And FullStory, I love our product, it does great stuff. We suffer from rage clicks more than I would like to believe. This was a long time ago in our product where there was a sort of a map view of things, and people would come into the product thinking that they could interact with the map view of things. They would just hammer on the mouse on this one thing, sending a signal to us to let us know that their intent was not being met. Those heuristics, again, we're only scratching the surface. We've got rage clicks. We've got a concept we call a dead click, which is somebody clicks on something and the page doesn't change. That button that looks like it's a button that isn't really a button, it's just an image. All the time people are doing that, and there's minor frustration involved in that. There's a concept of an error click where somebody clicks something and it spews an error in the console that can be monitored and pulled out and surfaced to teams that can fix it. And then this last one, Amy, do you know what this one is? Can you guess from a little iconography here?
Is it a happy click?
That is not a happy click, Amy.
Is it a mouse thrash?
It's a mouse thrash. Very good. Very good. Mouse thrash. Everybody does this. You go in. Is it over there? Is it over there? Is it over there? Back and forth, back and forth. That's a pattern that we should be able to distill and surface up. And in fact, FullStory does. Okay. Now, this is, again, the baby steps. I believe that over time, we will start to be able to take those signals and pull them into more descriptive segments, if you will. Who's frustrated? Who's engaged? Who's furious? Who's teetering on the edge of purchasing? Who's distracted? Those are all signals that I think over time, the machines, as they learn, will start to be able to help us tease out. So if you've got this concept of all of the data and the heuristics and being able to pull those signals out, the next step is to start to pull those together and measure them over time, where you can say, look, we've built a funnel. We understand where one of those heuristics is causing a sway in the funnel, and this is the impact that it's having on things. And so you can go in and say, an error click was, when it was present, it was really, really hurting a conversion, or it was hurting an engagement flow. And that technology is available now. Again, don't forget that behind every one of those charts and graphs is an individual, and checking back in with that individual is always important. I'm biased, of course, but I think a very powerful way to drive behavior change within an organization is through the use of session replay, because it really does, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a moving picture is worth a multiple of that. And so seeing frustration live and being able to share that within your organization is something that, beyond a simple chart and graph, will start to drive within your own organization change. Because digital experience really is a team sport. And I think too often we've siloed our organizations to work only within their organization, and they have their own sets of tools and their own sets of measurements. And really what you want to do is start to bring those sets of data and that collaboration together to drive better digital experience. And really, session replay is a great mechanism for that. Everybody knows how to interpret what they're seeing on a screen there. So I'll give an example or two quickly of how all of these things can start to come together, maybe for you and your teams to drive improvement. So this happens all the time, where a ticket comes in. It's a little Zendesk ticket, and somebody says, frowny face. This could have been Mrs. Bennett. I can't get this to work. Now, on the other side of this equation, you've got an agent and Mrs. Bennett, and the agent is going to reach back to Mrs. Bennett via email and say, what's the problem? I can't upload the video. Well, what browser are you using? Do you see any errors in the console? And that back and forth experience is slow and costly and frustrating, and just should never exist at all. If you can include a session URL into one of those ticket flows, so the first thing that the agent does is hit play and understand exactly what the user was doing, you can solve that problem much quicker. Ms. Bennett, I see what you were trying to do. You want to click on this button, not that button. That's the path to get you there. Now, within that organization, how often is it that a support person or a product manager will go to the engineering team and get this look when you say, hey, I think we got a problem, guys. And they're like, can't recreate the bug, therefore it must not be real. You can take that session and you can annotate it and say, hey, here's the bug This is the moment in time that it is happening. I'm going to go ahead and pass this into Jira where you live. And then those engineers can bounce back in and get a deeper view of the world and start to see what was happening on the network and what was happening on the console, so they don't have to spend a bunch of time trying to recreate the bug in the first place. So this is a semi-recent story where I, who uses FullStory all the time, came across an error where I was trying to pull some segment up and I got this little pop-up that said, hey, the user list didn't load. I would love to believe that FullStory delivers a perfect digital experience, but we're not there yet. Now, I could have fired off a quick Slack bomb to someone and said, hey, I just experienced this. But what's neat is I was able to go in and build a segment to understand how often people are seeing the text failed to load user list. And I was able to do that without any instrumentation because you bring all of the data in there. So once I've created that trend line and understood the problem, I set an alert to say, hey, if this ever spikes up above the dull roar of what we think is a reasonable amount, hit me in Slack and let me know, so I can then activate the rest of the organization to try to make this better. And I think that's a pretty powerful flow to get everybody working together. I'll give you one more little anecdote, and then I think we can probably go to Q&A. Another way to help drive empathy throughout your organization is something that we have done for a long time and a lot of our customers have done. These are all pictures of FullStory customers meeting as a team and what we would call game filming. Probably a careful note is you will see drink glasses in almost every one of the pictures here, because what teams are starting to do is they rally around some concept, a new feature we've launched, a user flow we care about, and then they watch these sessions and they're tallying up the winces when something doesn't go as planned, or the wins when something does go as planned. I think the solo cups have to do with the winces. I think there might be drinking. I don't know. We don't condone that though.
Not FullStory endorsed.
No, not at all. And so, you know, with that preface, I just thought it would be a nice intro to say these are some of the patterns that we're seeing right now. Here is the new frontier that is helping drive people towards a more empathetic digital experience, and maybe some tips of things that you might be able to do. And so with that, I'm gonna go to fireside chat, and Amy and I are gonna fireside chat.
Yes. Thank you. I loved all those stories. Thanks for sharing them. I am just going to warn everyone that at some point here, my husband and assistant is going to bring me a power cord for my computer.
Oh, great.
It's not too distracting, but this is the world we live in. So to kick things off here, I think I kind of wanted to just talk about, there are a lot of companies out there who are doing really great things with their digital experience. Thank you. And I wanted to talk about some of those, because we often talk about times when digital experience goes wrong, and that is a bummer, but there are often times where it goes really right. So I wanted to start, Scott, by just asking you, what are some really delightful digital experiences you've had recently?
That's good. So the first one that comes to mind was with Domino's Pizza. I know. We had a birthday party for my son, and there were lots of little boys running around like maniacs. We needed to get some pizza. What was so neat about the experience is once I had the order in, my pizza was tracked through the entire preparation to door delivery process. And when you're trying to manage 12 little boys that are running around, knowing when that pizza is going to show up at the door really was able to bring my cortisol down. And that was a very good experience. The order was easy, the tracking was good. Well done. Bravo, Domino's Pizza. Bravo. How about you, Amy? Any good ones?
I do have some, but I also wanted to say that that sort of ordering process with Domino's and then the delivery tracking. We talk a little bit about that actually in one of our ebooks on behavioral economics, because Domino's did some really awesome experimentation and testing to land on the flow that they have, leveraging goal gradient hypothesis, which is a behavioral economics concept that says that you can break like a long decision-making process into short, easy to attain steps and set really clear expectations as a way to increase conversion. So if you want to learn, if any of our viewers want to learn a little bit more about why that process is so delightful for somebody that has to kind of, ordering a pizza online can be a little tedious. You have to select each topping you want. If you want a lot of toppings, there are a lot of options when you order a pizza. And yeah, so.
Well, and if you think about the cost displacement side of that as well, you could do the order and your order will arrive about this time. How many calls, in absence of knowing every single step of the process, how many calls are they going to get from people saying, hey, is my pizza on its way? Is it there? I just think that's very clever.
Yeah, absolutely. That actually brings me to one of the delightful digital experiences I wanted to mention, which is in our family, we use a company called Grove to get sort of earth-friendly, sustainable products like cleaning things, and they actually have bamboo based toilet paper and paper towels. So bamboo grows a lot faster than trees and it's more sustainable. So anyway, I take it you're not familiar with this company?
I'm not, but I do have bamboo in my yard, and it is, what a pain.
Well, you could be turning it into toilet paper.
Now I know.
So obviously they are being impacted by the current situation. So shipping times are delayed, product availability is different. A lot of people are, wanting toilet paper, wanting paper towels, wanting hand sanitizer, wanting soap. And so it's, sort of a standard thing to do would be to say, our shipping times are delayed. We're so sorry. Thank you for sticking with us. But I feel like they have really been going above and beyond. And so, we have an order in, I get updates directly from them that let me know exactly like, here's where your order, here's the the place in the processing line that your order is in, here's when you can expect it. Every time they have an update, they let me know, again, so that I'm not calling them and saying, where's my order, what can I expect? And then additionally, for the items that they're running low on with inventory, they just, spin up a short wait list in the app. I can just click a button. I can be notified as soon as they have those products back in stock, and then I can place an order. And it's just been really helpful. I don't have to go to the store to see if they have toilet paper. I know that Grove is going to let me know when I can get that again, and that I'm going to be, one of the first people that can order that. So.
One more I'll just throw in there. Today, as I was preparing for this, I was doing some Googling, and I Googled, I think it was FullStory conversions, which is a product offering we have. And Google, because I was logged in to Google and I am a FullStory administrator, popped up some results about how FullStory could make our search terms better within our search results. And I thought it was a really clever, it was minimal amount of information, but just enough to make me go, we can be doing better there. So I clicked through, and it was pulling me down, to your point, in nice, easy, digestible steps to let me know that this is something that we could be doing better. And I thought it was pretty clever. Yeah,
that's nice. Okay, so let's, excuse me, jump right into questions here.
Moving on.
So let's talk a little bit about Mrs. Bennett's experience specifically, and for companies that are really wanting to know when there's a Miss Bennett out there that's having that bad experience, but they also want to make sure that they're respecting Miss Bennett's privacy. Can you talk a little bit about how businesses should be thinking about balancing those two maybe seemingly competing interests?
Absolutely. So let's start with, Ms. Bennett in the insurance example, she has a relationship with that insurance company. Were she to pick up the phone and want to have a conversation with that insurance company, the person that she's going to engage with in a phone conversation is going to need the information necessary. Let me pull up your record, Ms. Bennett. And I think that that's the right relationship as it comes to helping support her in a logged in, understanding her flow view of things. Now, that's different than the expectation of her coming somewhere and having a completely anonymous relationship where she hasn't engaged. And I think, FullStory takes a pretty aggressive stance on the idea of privacy. We launched something recently we would call privacy by default, where we think the right thing to do is say no personal information. I mean, even to the extent that the text that you have on your page is not visible. No text objects leave the browser or the device. And then, once you've started to build a deeper relationship with the customer, you can bring in additional bits of data. And so I think it has to do with the expectations of what your customer would do in the situation that you would be working with that particular customer.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Let me jump to one maybe quick question here. Jake would like to know, how does FullStory work with email campaigns? So I'm assuming he's kind of wondering, like, people are sending a lot of email campaigns right now out to their customer base to let them know things about, for example, with Grove, about shipping delays, about product availability. How can people use FullStory to understand the experience from those email campaigns and how that might compare to something else?
That's a good question, Jake. Thank you for asking. And Amy, you too, we both came out of the email world, so we probably have a little bit of background there. Well, first of all, FullStory isn't going to be able to help you understand really anything within the confines of the inbox. That's a separate world, and we wouldn't condone any sort of usage within that world. The way that it can work is there are usually query parameter, click through query parameters that you're going to add to an email campaign. And within FullStory, you can start to create segments on those query parameters in order to understand what things are getting clicked through and then what paths people are taking on the other side of those.
Yes, and the other, sorry, if you can hear the loud vacuuming in the background.
We can, we're in good shape.
Oh, good, okay. The other thing I would say is that, especially for companies that are leveraging email as a helpful way to keep their customers and their subscribers up to date on whatever they need to know about how their business is impacted or responding to the current situation, making sure that you think about how your audience's consumption of that email might be different now than what you're typically used to. So, whatever email provider you use, you can kind of look at the stats there to see how people are opening. You can, if you're using UTM parameters, as Scott mentioned, you can hop into FullStory, you can segment by those parameters, and then watch and see, what are the commonalities in user agents and browsers and devices, and then check those experiences and make sure that if you're asking your customers to do something like update their orders or change their preferences, that works through all of those flows, because nothing is more frustrating than receiving an email on your phone, trying to take action, and then having the sort of mobile version of that break. Okay. Let's see. So some of these you kind of touched on a little bit in your wonderful presentation, but maybe we can kind of revisit them as needed. So we talk a little bit about how important, or you talked a little bit about how helpful and important getting connected to those actual customer sessions, that actual customer experience, can be for building empathy, for making it clear what the right next steps are to improve a customer's experience or specifically their digital experience. But for other companies, the empathy part is really easy, but figuring out how to find the best next steps and prioritize the right changes against all the business's priorities is sort of where the challenge lies, where the rubber meets the road. So how would you advise a company that's really struggling with that? Maybe they're using FullStory, they see, they're logging their winces, and now they're not sure how to start to knock out the number of winces that customers are experiencing.
It is a good question. I would start with the sometimes very difficult challenge of prioritizing the business priorities, and being very clear on what those are. Is it more important that you are driving in-visit conversions? Is it more important that you are building lifetime value, across numerous visits? And there's some tension between those two things. This sounds like a shameless plug, perhaps it is. The FullStory conversions module that I mentioned earlier, that really is the intent behind that particular arc of work, was to say, FullStory, you're great, we can watch a bunch of sessions, but I can't watch all the sessions. How do I really start to get a priority order around what it is that I should be doing? The thesis behind that is, if you have all of the data, you can start to map any user journey that is meaningful to you, and start to see where there are drop-offs in that. And then FullStory is going to help you try to quantify the impact, the magnitude of those, so you can say, if in-visit conversions is the most important thing, well, it turns out that this error message, when it is present, is having a huge impact on it. If you were able to fix that, go fix that, and you will be there. It is worth mentioning, there is always going to be resource constraints on the other side of things. And so sometimes knowing that this one thing, if we could fix it, would lift things up, but it might be really hard to fix that one thing. Maybe that means you're going to completely have to overhaul the information architecture of your website. And so there's understanding the priorities, and then understanding your ability to sort those priorities based on the capacity that you have to get things knocked out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, next question here from Matt. He says his company has a desire to use heat mapping and analysis for some of their upcoming projects. Do you have any tips for how to start out with using that kind of tool for a new project? He says, for example, how many sessions would you need to get a good analysis? So maybe you're talking about like how much traffic is gonna give you a good oversight.
That is a good question, Matt. I am not the statistician to tell you exactly what statistically significant looks like. So I think you're a Google search away from that very precise answer. I will tell you a couple of nuanced things. One is, I think you can get signal pretty quick. Think about if there was no FullStory that existed in the world, and you were going to try to understand user engagement. The way you would do it is you would go hire a user research firm, and you would bring 10 to 20 people behind the one-way mirror, and you would watch them as they navigated through, and you would take notes. Those are relatively small sample sizes for you to start to get some signal on where people are headed, what they're engaging with, what they aren't engaging with. The other thing I'd note that is, I think, a bit of a powerful but hidden feature within FullStory as it pertains to the way that we look at click maps and heat maps and that arc of work, is those things fit very well with search. And so if you use FullStory search to say, I want to understand what interaction looks like when somebody's on a mobile device, search mobile, jump into a session, have a look at the heat map. All the metrics that you're going to see there and all the interactions are going to be scoped to people on mobile. And you can get very precise with that. So if I want to understand people that are on Safari with this screen width and this screen dimension, when they're on this PDP page with this query parameter, and you open that up and you want to see those visual analytics, those will be scoped to that particular problem as well. Amy, anything to add there?
No, I think that makes sense. I think one thing that came to mind to me in terms of like how many sessions, I think one of the reasons that we encourage people to capture everything is that you just don't know which sessions are going to be, especially as you start to segment down. You're trying to look at maybe people are on mobile versus desktop, or a certain type of user or certain geographical differences. You really want all of your customer sessions to be able to look at, to dive into that. And then at the same time, if you're capturing all, then you can rest assured that you have that those trends, that click maps and any of FullStory's charts and graphs are going to be showing you a fully representative look at sort of the general actions of your audience. And then of course, because you'll have session replay, you'll be able to get down into the specifics if you need to. So I would be worried less about, if the question is, do I have enough traffic to understand? As long as you're capturing all your users, then you do have enough to understand all your users. And if the question is, can I sample and get a smaller amount? I think we would say, it's possible, but it's not going to be, you're not going to get as good of a view into your customers and your users' behavior.
I would agree with that. And I would also note that, Ms. Bennett is a sample of one. And so that one use case, that one painful path that she took, surfacing that up from a grassroots perspective, whether it's FullStory pulling out the frustration heuristics or a ticket that is filed that surfaces that up, will likely lead you down a path to understand a pattern of behavior you didn't really know was there in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. Okay, I think we have time for maybe one or two more. So here's one. Oftentimes when companies address their digital experience, it's mostly from a reactive place. So we kind of talked through, a support ticket comes in. This is you're acting in a reactive way. More and more, I think teams are aiming to be proactive in their approach. They can get that extra kind of heads up against their competitors. What are some, maybe even just small, really doable ways that a team or a business or company could start to address their digital experience more proactively rather than waiting for those customer support tickets to come in?
It's so there's a burst of responses that are in my mind. I mean, I would start with, you would want to define the key flows. And then I think, FullStory is going to surface up. If you just scroll down the page there, we're likely in the cards and visualizations that we have, we're going to try to surface up hotspots proactively for you. And I think they're often overlooked. So I would tell you, spend time with some of the frustration heuristics, with rage grade, with things of that nature, which will help guide those out. We have some pretty fun stuff on the roadmap that I think will be, that I have been playing with recently, that I think gets people in the mindset of in a continuous optimization culture, which is what we all want. Part of the step of continuous optimization is going to be an understand aspect to things, a visualization of understanding engagement that hasn't really been easy or possible in the past with, I would kind of say, more traditional analytics tools, which are great, but these are, I think of them as almost like, don't over fixate on the word, but you're thinking about agile visualizations. We just launched a new product. We want to understand what's going on with that. We just launched a new feature. We want to understand what's going on with that. I think FullStory is well poised to put some pretty interesting things in front of you. So there's a launch, iterate, understand cycle that you can react to.
Definitely. And did you mention alerts, Scott? That was what
I didn't. Would you mention alerts? That would have been
you spoke about it a little bit in your presentation, but in terms of there's sort of proactive can be kind of on a spectrum, and there's like the idea of being able to fix and respond to a customer possibly before they have to write in. And alerts that can be often an opportunity to do that. So you showed in the presentation, you can set FullStory to alert you when there's a certain, number of people are experiencing a specific error or something like that. Those are easy ways to quickly get a heads up that something's not right. We have done this many times really successfully in FullStory. We see that something has gone wrong. We can find out exactly how many people it impacted, how many customers, who they are. We can fix it, and then we can email them and say, hey, I'm so sorry that this happened. It's been fixed. We just want to let you know. And that can be a really satisfying experience from the customer's perspective. So that might be a tip that I would share as well.
Just to pile on real quick, we also last week, I think, launched webhooks. And so there's some ways to not solely rely on the user interface for FullStory, but to configure some things that are important and then let webhooks pick those up and push those out to other tools and mechanisms.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, one last question from Jake. He says, another privacy related question, does FullStory pull in data from a customer's social media accounts like Google or Facebook, or I assume Twitter or LinkedIn, any of those places?
We do not by default, no. So our position, just to be clear, our position is that FullStory is a tool that is helping people understand digital experience. And so, our emphasis is really about, in a privacy-friendly way, having you and your teams understand the flows that are going to give optimal experiences, perfect digital experiences. And so, pulling in social media and things of that nature don't really fit in with that charter necessarily. I will note when it comes to knowing whether a user came from an ad or from a Facebook ad or a Google ad, certainly we're going to understand the referring URLs and using query parameters and UTMs to help surface up that type of information for you.
Yeah, I just to kind of echo and add on to what you're saying, FullStory is not trying to build a profile of an individual's presence across the web. We are really trying to help businesses understand when somebody is struggling to, for example, upload a dash cam video of a wreck that they were just in. That's really what our focus is. That being said, I can imagine a flow where somebody is really trying to get help and maybe support's not working for them. They reach out across Twitter, and then you're really wanting a flow to see like, okay, well, what happened for this? And that's where I would lean on our integrations with customer support tools that are much more likely to help you connect those dots in, again, a really privacy-friendly way that protects that person's identity and make sure that information that's not happening on your website is not in FullStory. Great. Well, I think that's about it. We're right at time here. So I think there are a couple, as we were talking, there are a couple of resources that I think would be helpful for people if they want to follow up on or read a little bit more about any of the things we covered. So when we send out our follow-up email with the recording, I'll include some links to those things. We have some more detailed information on prioritizing, how to prioritize work to improve your digital experience, and things of that nature. And those should be coming, that follow-up should be coming from me or from somebody on the FullStory team. And so if you do have another question that you didn't get a chance to ask here, you can respond directly to that email and somebody from FullStory will make sure that you get an answer. That's it, Scott. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Amy. Thank everybody for attending. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, guys.
Absolutely. And we'll see you guys later. Bye.
Okay, bye.